What would you do if one moment changed your entire life? What if, in the blink of an eye, you lost everything you thought you had? Rachel Miller had never expected her life to turn upside down in a matter of seconds. A waitress in one of New York's busiest upscale restaurants, Rachel was used to being overlooked, to navigating through long hours with little recognition, but always finding comfort in the predictability of her daily routine. She'd mastered the art of multitasking, balancing trays, memorizing orders, and maintaining that forced smile while trying to make ends meet in a city that seemed to devour the dreams of everyone who dared to live in it. But today was different. It was just another Thursday evening, and the restaurant buzzed with the usual energy of the dinner rush. The chatter of guests, the clinking of glasses, and the hum of conversation filled the air. Rachel moved swiftly between tables, her mind already calculating the tips she might earn by the end of the night. She had a clear plan in mind: work hard, get a decent tip, go home, and repeat. But then came a moment, a single word, that shattered that plan and altered the course of her life forever. He entered with an air of quiet confidence. Tall, well-dressed, with a calm yet commanding presence, he caught Rachel's attention immediately. His name, she would later learn, was Andrew Lee, a successful businessman and millionaire with roots in both New York and Shanghai. He was the kind of person Rachel thought she would never cross paths with, someone whose world was far removed from hers. She had no idea at that moment that he was the one who would unknowingly set her on a new path. The fateful interaction happened when she approached his table. "Good evening, sir. May I take your order?" she asked politely, ready to go through the familiar motions. But as she looked at him, something about his presence seemed different. Something about him felt less like a typical customer and more like someone who had a story of his own, someone with layers. To her surprise, Andrew looked at her with a friendly, almost curious expression. "I don't suppose you speak Chinese, do you?" he asked in a soft tone, his eyes scanning the menu. Rachel blinked. It was a question she wasn't expecting, but it made sense. She had always spoken Mandarin with her mother growing up. It was a small part of her upbringing that she had kept to herself, something only her family knew about. She had never thought to use it in her line of work, but it seemed harmless enough. And besides, she'd always believed that speaking multiple languages was an asset in a city like New York. "Yes, actually," Rachel replied, a small smile forming. "I can speak Chinese." Andrew's eyes brightened, a genuine smile forming on his face. "I thought so. I'm from Shanghai originally, so I prefer a little bit of Chinese with my meal when I can." In that moment, without thinking, Rachel shifted into Mandarin. She asked if he was familiar with any of the restaurant's signature dishes, making the conversation flow easily. She had no idea that the simple act of speaking in her native tongue would lead to consequences she could not yet comprehend. But as the meal progressed and Rachel continued to converse with him in Chinese, she noticed something strange happening in the room. Her manager, Henry, had been watching her from across the dining area. His face was unreadable, but Rachel could feel the weight of his gaze. There was an unsettling tension in the air, though she didn't understand why. When the conversation came to an end and Andrew thanked her for her excellent service, he left her a generous tip and promised to return. But it was what happened afterward that would leave Rachel wondering if she had made a mistake. Rachel didn't think much of the incident at first. She moved on, finishing her shift like any other, unaware that she had just crossed a line that would affect her life in ways she couldn't imagine. As she clocked out and made her way to the employee lounge, she was called into Henry's office. Her stomach sank as she walked down the hallway, the familiar sound of her shoes clicking against the floor echoing in her ears. When she entered, she saw Henry sitting behind his desk, his expression serious. The air in the room felt thick, heavy, like the calm before a storm. "Rachel, we need to talk," he said, his voice unusually sharp. Rachel felt a sudden lump form in her throat. "What's going on?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Henry didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I noticed you were speaking Mandarin to a customer tonight," he said, his tone neutral but his eyes hard. "We've had complaints about this before. It's unprofessional." Rachel's heart dropped. She tried to process what he was saying. Unprofessional? But he seemed to like it. He was fine with it. "I was just trying to make him feel comfortable." "It doesn't matter," Henry interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "The rules are clear. We don't speak foreign languages to customers unless they request it. It creates a rift, an image problem for the restaurant." "I'm sorry, but this behavior isn't acceptable." Rachel was stunned. "You're firing me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Just for speaking a language I know? A language I grew up with." Henry sighed, rubbing his forehead as if the decision was weighing on him. "I'm not firing you, Rachel, but you need to understand. We can't have staff creating situations like this. It's bad for business. I'll have to give you a warning. Consider this your final chance." As the words hung in the air, Rachel felt a deep sense of injustice. She had done nothing wrong, yet here she was, being reprimanded for speaking her native tongue. It didn't make sense. The unease in her stomach grew, and the sense of betrayal settled in. But what was worse than the immediate sting of the reprimand was the realization that this warning, this threat to her job, would haunt her for weeks to come. Rachel walked out of Henry's office with her heart racing. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. This wasn't just about a language. There was something deeper at play, something that she was yet to understand. As she stepped out into the cool night air, Rachel glanced at her phone. A notification popped up on the screen. "Tip from Andrew Lee. $100. Rachel stared at the screen, feeling a strange mixture of gratitude and confusion. Could he have known what had just happened? Was his tip a form of sympathy, or was it a simple gesture of kindness? Before she could process any further, her phone buzzed again, this time with a message from her mother. "How was work today, honey? Anything exciting?" Rachel stared at the screen, her fingers hovering over the keys. She wanted to tell her mother everything, how unfair it all felt, how helpless she was in this situation. But instead, she typed a simple reply. "It was fine, Mom. Just another day." But in that moment, Rachel knew something had changed. Something she couldn't quite grasp yet, but it was there, lurking beneath the surface. The question lingered in her mind, unanswered. What would happen next? And with that uncertainty, her life was about to take a turn she never expected. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Rachel Miller's life wasn't defined by luxury or privilege, and it never would be. Raised in a modest neighborhood in Queens, New York, she learned early on that the world didn't owe you anything. Her mother, May, was the glue that held their small family together. May had emigrated from China in her early 20s, bringing Rachel with her as a baby, in search of a better life. Her father had left before Rachel was born, leaving May to raise her daughter alone, with no financial support or emotional stability from the man who had promised to be part of their future. Growing up, Rachel was aware of how hard her mother worked to make ends meet. May was a seamstress, working long hours in a factory, stitching clothes for minimum wage. Rachel never knew the full extent of the struggles her mother faced, but she could see the exhaustion in May's eyes when she came home after a 12-hour shift. Rachel knew better than to complain, and even though there were days when food was scarce, she learned to appreciate the little things: the rare trips to the park, the nights spent listening to May's stories about life in China, and the warmth of a home that, despite its cramped conditions, was filled with love. Rachel's childhood wasn't easy, but it was full of resilience. May, with her quiet strength, instilled in Rachel the importance of education and hard work. "We might not have much, but we have our minds and our hearts. No one can take that from us," May would always say. Rachel's mother was a woman who had known both hardship and hope, and she passed on that wisdom to her daughter. Despite their modest life, Rachel always had big dreams. From an early age, she knew she wanted to do something more than just work in a factory or stay in the same neighborhood forever. She was a bright student in school, excelling in subjects like math and English, but it was her fluency in Mandarin that set her apart. Her mother had taught her Chinese as a way to preserve their culture, but it became more than that for Rachel. It was a connection to a part of herself that she couldn't fully express in English, a way to communicate with her mother in the language that was hers, not the language of a city that often felt foreign. Rachel knew that her language skills could be a ticket to something greater, but she didn't have the resources to pursue higher education. Instead, she took a job as a waitress right after high school to help support her mother, who had recently fallen ill and couldn't work as much. It was a tough decision to make, but Rachel believed it was the right one. She was determined to provide for her family, to give her mother the rest she deserved after years of sacrifice. New York was a city that never stopped, and neither did Rachel. She worked at various restaurants, picking up shifts where she could, trying to make enough money to cover rent and groceries. The hours were long, and the work was grueling, but Rachel was used to it. The people she met, tourists, business people, locals, were often indifferent, but Rachel found a strange comfort in the fast-paced environment of the restaurant. There, she could disappear into the chaos, never standing out too much, but never being ignored either. Her coworkers were a mixed bag of personalities, some kind, some bitter, some just passing through. Rachel, with her quiet determination, kept her head down, focused on doing her job to the best of her ability. She'd smile through the long shifts, even when her feet ached, and she'd go home every night, exhausted but satisfied with the work she had done. But it wasn't just the work that kept her going. It was the promise that one day she would escape this life, not just for herself, but for her mother, too. Her relationship with her mother was everything. May was her rock, her foundation. Rachel didn't have many friends. Her life was centered around work and caring for her mom. They shared a small apartment in a less-than-desirable part of Queens, and while it wasn't glamorous, it was theirs. On weekends, when Rachel had time off, they would watch old Chinese movies together, sometimes with her mother translating the parts that Rachel couldn't understand. They'd laugh over silly scenes, share stories of their family back in China, and sometimes, in the quiet moments, just sit together, the weight of the world outside the apartment door. Rachel often dreamed of leaving New York, of starting fresh somewhere new, but the reality of that dream always felt distant. The cost of living in the city was high, and the opportunities felt out of reach. But she kept pushing forward, believing that one day, something would change. She had to believe that. One day, while serving a particularly difficult customer, Rachel was approached by a man who would change everything. At first, she didn't realize who he was. He was just another customer in a sea of people, dressed in a sharp suit, with a demeanor that screamed wealth. She was busy trying to manage the chaos of the restaurant, juggling orders and clearing tables, but something about this man caught her attention. There was something calm and collected about him, a quiet confidence that intrigued her. As she approached his table to take his order, she noticed something different. He was looking at her intently, almost as if he knew something about her that she didn't. His eyes were dark, but there was something warm about his gaze, something that made her feel like she was being seen, really seen, for the first time in a long time. It wasn't until later that Rachel realized he was Andrew Lee, a millionaire businessman with ties to both New York and Shanghai. She didn't know much about him at the time, but she did know that he was different from the usual customers she dealt with. When he asked if she spoke Chinese, Rachel was caught off guard. She hadn't expected him to speak to her in Mandarin, but she quickly responded, knowing that it would make him feel more comfortable. They spoke for a few minutes, but that brief interaction stayed with her long after. It was a small moment, insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it planted a seed. Rachel didn't know it yet, but this man, this millionaire who seemed so out of reach, would become someone who could offer her an opportunity. An opportunity that would set her life on an entirely new trajectory. Her relationship with Andrew Lee would become more than just a chance meeting at a restaurant. It would become a turning point, the moment when Rachel's life, which had seemed so set in its quiet, predictable path, would begin to unravel and, eventually, reshape itself in ways she could never have anticipated. The following weeks at the restaurant felt like a blur to Rachel. Life continued in its typical rhythm, with early mornings, long hours, and the steady hum of customers in and out of the bustling restaurant. But something had changed. The conversation with Andrew Lee lingered in her mind long after she had forgotten about the rest of her shift. There was a sense of curiosity, something she couldn't shake, like she had unwittingly tapped into a different world, a world that seemed far removed from the life she knew. Though she tried to push the encounter out of her thoughts, it kept resurfacing. The way he had looked at her, the way he had spoken to her with such genuine interest, felt different from how most customers treated her. It was as though, for just a moment, Rachel was not just a waitress, but a person worthy of attention, worthy of something more than the usual indifference she had grown accustomed to. Still, Rachel tried to maintain her focus on the present. She knew better than to get carried away by fantasies. Life in New York had a way of humbling you, reminding you of your place. And Rachel's place, at least for the time being, was firmly entrenched in her job at the restaurant. She had a routine to follow, bills to pay, and a mother to care for. There was no time for daydreams or distractions. But that didn't stop her from noticing Andrew Lee whenever he returned to the restaurant. He was there often, always at the same table, ordering the same meal, a quiet man, always polite and well-mannered. Rachel served him every time, their conversations always casual but comfortable. And though the restaurant's hectic pace continued to roll on, with its whirl of voices and clatter of dishes, every time Rachel approached his table, she felt something different. It was as if those brief exchanges, those few moments in the middle of her shifts, were an escape from her otherwise monotonous life. Then, one evening, things took an unexpected turn. It was another busy Friday night, and Rachel was rushing through the restaurant, moving between tables and trying to keep up with the orders. The restaurant was packed, as usual, with a mix of tourists and locals. Rachel's mind was focused on the typical demands of her job: make sure drinks are topped off, get the food out fast, stay polite no matter how tired you are. But when she approached Andrew's table that evening, something in his demeanor caught her attention. He was no longer sitting alone. Rachel had gotten used to his solitary meals, the quiet presence he brought with him. But tonight, there was a woman sitting across from him, a woman with striking red hair and an expensive-looking dress that screamed luxury. Rachel hesitated for a second before stepping forward. As she placed down the menus, she forced a polite smile, trying to maintain her usual composure. "Good evening, Mr. Lee," Rachel said, glancing at the woman briefly. "What can I get for you tonight?" Andrew looked up at her with a slight smile, his eyes soft. "Ah, Rachel," he greeted her warmly, his tone as calm and kind as it had always been. "This is Elizabeth, my business partner. She's visiting from London." Rachel gave a quick nod, taking in the woman's presence. Elizabeth offered a smile that was much colder than Andrew's, but Rachel didn't take offense. She'd learned long ago that people came in all kinds of personalities, and she wasn't one to judge. But as she took their orders and moved away, something gnawed at her. She couldn't help but wonder why Andrew had introduced her to the woman. Was it simply a casual introduction, or was there more to it? She wasn't naive enough to think she knew anything about his personal life, but it was hard to ignore the fact that their previous conversations had felt different. They had felt meaningful, even if brief. But now, as she watched him smile at Elizabeth, she couldn't shake the feeling of being replaced. It was an odd, uncomfortable sensation, as though something she had once thought was special had been taken away without explanation. As the evening wore on, Rachel found herself more distracted than usual. Her mind wandered between the normal hum of the restaurant and her growing curiosity about Andrew's life. Was he really just another rich businessman, or was there something more to him that she hadn't yet uncovered? More importantly, why had she allowed herself to get attached to a fleeting connection that, in the grand scheme of things, wasn't meant to last? The night was nearly over when Henry, the restaurant manager, called Rachel into his office. He was standing by the door, his expression unreadable. "Rachel, I need to talk to you," Henry said with a stern tone. "Come inside." Rachel's stomach dropped. She wasn't sure what to expect, but she had a sinking feeling it wasn't going to be good. The office was small, dimly lit, and smelled faintly of disinfectant. Henry motioned for her to sit down across from him, and without preamble, he spoke. "Are you aware of what happened earlier tonight?" he asked, his voice low. Rachel frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" Henry let out a sigh, his eyes narrowing. "You were speaking Mandarin to that customer, Andrew Lee. You know the rules, Rachel. We don't speak foreign languages unless the customer specifically requests it." Rachel's heart sank. "But he speaks Chinese. He prefers it," she protested, trying to keep her voice calm. "I don't care about that," Henry snapped, his voice rising. "The rules are the rules. This isn't a place for personal connections. You're crossing a line, and it's starting to create tension. We don't want to give the impression that we cater to one customer over others." Rachel sat in stunned silence. She had never felt more humiliated in her life. "You're reprimanding me for speaking to him in Mandarin?" "For doing my job." Henry stared at her coldly. "It's not about your job. It's about professionalism. I'm warning you, Rachel. I won't tolerate this kind of behavior again." The words stung like a slap. Rachel had always prided herself on being professional, on doing her best even when the work was exhausting or the customers were demanding. But now, the very thing that had been an asset, her ability to speak multiple languages, was being held against her. And for what? For a fleeting conversation with a customer who, in his own way, had seemed to appreciate her effort? Her throat tightened as the weight of the situation hit her. She couldn't believe this was happening, couldn't believe that a simple act of kindness, of trying to make someone feel comfortable, was being twisted into something unprofessional. "Understood," Rachel said, forcing the words out, her voice barely a whisper. As she left Henry's office and returned to the kitchen to finish her shift, her mind raced. What was she supposed to do now? Keep quiet? Conform to the rules that made no sense? But deep down, Rachel knew something was shifting. The more she tried to follow the rules, the more she realized that following them would only keep her in the same place, surrounded by the same tired faces, doing the same unfulfilling work. And that was a place she no longer wanted to be. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when Rachel found herself standing outside the restaurant, the harsh sounds of the city muffled by the weight of her thoughts. The past few days had felt like a blur, each one more suffocating than the last. The reprimand from Henry still echoed in her ears, and the frustration of being silenced for something as simple as speaking Mandarin left her feeling powerless. She had always tried to stay focused on the things that mattered, working hard, supporting her mother, and staying true to herself, but now she felt torn. For the first time, the job that had been her lifeline felt like a cage. Rachel stepped into the cool breeze outside, her mind a whirlwind of emotions. She had been working at this restaurant for years, and now, for the first time, she questioned whether it was enough. Was this all she was destined for? Serving plates and taking orders, watching as her potential slipped through her fingers with every passing day? And yet, what choice did she have? The bills needed to be paid, her mother needed care, and the dream of something more felt so far out of reach. But the encounter with Andrew Lee lingered in her thoughts, like a flicker of light in the darkness. She had never truly believed in chance meetings, but there was something about the way Andrew had spoken to her that made her wonder if fate had a hand in it. He had seen something in her, something she wasn't sure she had seen in herself. And maybe, just maybe, he could help her find the path to something different. Rachel had seen Andrew around the restaurant more often in the last few weeks, but it was always the same. Brief, polite exchanges, a smile here and there, and then he would leave, disappearing into the world of high-powered business deals and extravagant lifestyles. He had never made any move beyond this superficial interaction. But deep down, Rachel had a nagging feeling that he knew exactly what he was doing. He had seen her potential, and yet he hadn't made a move to help her. Was it out of politeness, or something else? That day, as she closed the restaurant for the night, Rachel made a decision. She wasn't going to wait for anyone to pull her out of the life she had built. She had to take a step herself. She didn't know what it would look like, but she had to try. Andrew had been kind to her, and though she wasn't sure what exactly it was, she decided to seize the opportunity that had so quietly presented itself. She took a deep breath, smoothed out her uniform, and, after locking up, made her way to the restaurant's exit. It wasn't much. She was just another young woman in New York with dreams that seemed out of reach. But Rachel had learned one important thing from her mother. If you want something badly enough, you take the chance, no matter how small. The next morning, she found herself standing outside a glossy building in the financial district. The glass windows reflected the hustle and bustle of the city, but inside, she couldn't help but feel out of place. She had never been to this part of Manhattan before, and everything seemed so pristine, so polished. It made her feel even more out of touch with the world she had spent her whole life in. Andrew's office was on the 42nd floor. Rachel had Googled him the night before, looking for any possible way to contact him, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he would remember her from the restaurant. She had found a professional contact form online, a way to reach out. But when she typed the email, she hesitated. Was this too forward? Was she being foolish? Before she could change her mind, she pressed send. Mr. Lee, the email began. I hope this message finds you well. My name is Rachel Miller. We've met a few times at your favorite restaurant, and I've always been struck by your generosity and warmth. I wanted to reach out to you because I'm at a crossroads in my life, and I feel like I need a change. I know this may seem unexpected, but I would love to speak with you about any advice you might have for someone looking to break into a new path, perhaps in the business world. I realize this may be asking a lot, but if you would be willing to spare a few minutes of your time, I would be incredibly grateful. After hitting send, Rachel sat back, her heart racing. She hadn't expected an immediate response, but there was something about this step that made her feel like she was finally taking control of her destiny. Maybe Andrew would ignore her, maybe he wouldn't, but either way, she had made the effort. She was moving forward. For days, she waited. There were moments when doubt crept in, when she wondered if it was too much, if she had overstepped. What if she came across as desperate? What if it was all for nothing? But just when she was starting to lose hope, an email appeared in her inbox. Ms. Miller, it began, and Rachel's heart skipped a beat. Thank you for your email. I appreciate your kind words, and I understand where you're coming from. I believe everyone deserves a chance, especially someone as determined as you. I'd be happy to meet and discuss your situation further. How about we meet for coffee next week? My office is at 5th Avenue and 52nd Street. I look forward to hearing from you. Andrew Lee. The email confirmed that he had received her message and was willing to meet with her. Rachel couldn't believe it. She had taken a step into the unknown, and somehow she had found herself face to face with the very person who could change everything for her. But as the day of the meeting approached, Rachel couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. This wasn't just about a job or a favor from a wealthy businessman. It was about changing her entire life, stepping away from everything she had ever known and into a world that was completely unfamiliar. Still, she knew one thing: she couldn't go back. Not now. The meeting loomed ahead, like the first step of an unpredictable journey. Rachel didn't know where it would lead, but there was a fire inside her, burning with the promise of something new. She was scared, but she had learned long ago that fear could be the fuel for growth. As she looked out of her small apartment window at the sprawling city below, Rachel felt the first stirrings of hope in what had once felt like a hopeless existence. Her journey was just beginning. The day of the meeting with Andrew Lee finally arrived, and Rachel felt a mix of anticipation and dread knotting her stomach. She had spent the last few days obsessing over every possible detail: what to wear, how to act, what to say. This was it, her shot at something more than the life she had known. But what if she wasn't ready? What if she didn't belong in this world? She stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her blazer for the umpteenth time. It wasn't that she hadn't dressed professionally before, she had, countless times, but today felt different. This wasn't just a regular meeting, this was a moment that could change everything. She had poured every ounce of hope into this single encounter. If she messed it up, there would be no going back. Rachel took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves, and reminded herself that she had done something brave by reaching out. No matter what happened, she had already made a choice to move forward. The meeting was scheduled for 2:00 p.m., and Rachel found herself walking the streets of Midtown Manhattan, the bustling energy of the city amplifying the whirlwind inside her. She had taken the subway to Fifth Avenue, and now, as she stood outside the towering office building where Andrew's company was headquartered, she almost couldn't believe she was here. The building looked every bit as impressive as she had imagined, a sleek, modern structure with glass windows reflecting the sky and the world below. She felt so small in comparison, like a grain of sand in the vast expanse of a desert. But this was her moment. Rachel squared her shoulders and walked through the revolving doors, the cool air-conditioned breeze feeling like a stark contrast to the warmth of the summer day outside. She approached the reception desk, where a woman in a sharply pressed suit greeted her with a smile. "Good afternoon. How can I assist you?" the receptionist asked. "I'm here for a meeting with Mr. Lee," Rachel replied, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. The receptionist nodded, typing something into her computer. "Of course. Please have a seat. He'll be with you shortly." Rachel sat down in one of the plush chairs, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She could hear the soft hum of the office environment around her, the faint sound of phones ringing, the occasional murmur of conversations, but all she could focus on was the meeting ahead. It wasn't long before the elevator doors opened, and Andrew stepped out, dressed in a tailored suit that spoke of wealth and refinement. His posture was relaxed, but there was an air of authority about him that Rachel couldn't help but notice. He smiled when he saw her, and his expression softened as he approached. "Rachel, I'm so glad you could make it," he said, his voice warm and inviting. "I trust you had no trouble finding the place?" "No, not at all," Rachel replied, standing up to shake his hand. His grip was firm, yet friendly. "Good," he said, nodding toward the glass doors leading to a conference room. "Please, follow me." They walked together through the sleek, modern office, passing by walls lined with abstract art and polished floors that seemed to gleam in the overhead lighting. Rachel felt out of place in this pristine environment, but she was determined to keep her composure. She wasn't here to feel intimidated. She was here to prove herself. As they entered the conference room, Andrew gestured toward the chairs around the table. "Please have a seat," he said, settling into the chair across from her. Rachel sat down, trying to remain calm, but her mind was racing. She had no idea what this meeting would entail, but she had to be prepared for anything. "So, Rachel," Andrew began, folding his hands in front of him, "I'm glad you reached out. It's not often I hear from someone with your determination. Tell me, what made you want to take this step?" Rachel took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. This was it, the moment she had prepared for. "I've been working as a waitress for a few years now," she said, her voice steady but quiet. "And while I'm grateful for the job, I've always felt like there's something more out there for me. I've always wanted to get into the business world, but I didn't know where to start. I don't have a fancy degree, and I don't have any connections. But I've got a lot of ambition, and I'm willing to work harder than anyone else. I just need someone to give me a chance." Andrew listened intently, his expression thoughtful. He didn't interrupt, but his eyes never left hers. When she finished speaking, he leaned back in his chair and folded his arms, taking a moment to consider her words. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said finally. "Most people in your position would be content staying in their comfort zone, but you've taken a risk. And that tells me you're serious." Rachel's heart raced at his words. She had been afraid he would dismiss her, that he would tell her she was wasting her time. But Andrew was different. He saw something in her. "But you're right," he continued, his tone shifting to one of quiet seriousness. "The business world is competitive, and it's not easy to break into. But it's not impossible. If you're willing to put in the work, I can help you find a path." Rachel could hardly believe what she was hearing. He was offering her a chance. A real chance. She had spent so many years doubting herself, thinking that she wasn't cut out for anything more than the life she had been given. But now, here was this wealthy businessman, someone who had built an empire, telling her she could do it too. "I can introduce you to some people," Andrew said, his voice firm. "People who can help guide you, give you the mentorship you need. But it won't be easy. You'll have to prove yourself, and it'll take time. Are you prepared for that?" Rachel nodded without hesitation. "I am. I've never been more sure of anything in my life." Andrew's eyes softened as he smiled. "Good. Then let's get started." In that moment, Rachel felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the uncertainty of the past few weeks dissolving into a sense of purpose. This was no longer just a dream. This was real. She had taken the first step, and with Andrew's help, she knew she could make it. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but she was ready for the challenge. This was her chance, and she wasn't going to waste it. As they talked more about her potential opportunities, Rachel felt a surge of hope she hadn't known in years. She had come into this meeting unsure of where it might lead, but now she could see a new future unfolding before her. And for the first time in a long while, Rachel felt like she was finally on the right path. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The weeks following her meeting with Andrew were a blur of activity. Rachel's life had shifted in ways she hadn't imagined possible. Andrew had kept his promise, introducing her to several influential people in the business world. She had been granted opportunities to shadow them, and although they were brief, those moments had left an indelible mark on her. It wasn't just the lessons they taught her, it was the belief they had in her potential, the way they saw past her humble beginnings and recognized her drive. But despite the excitement and promise of her new path, the reality of it all weighed heavily on her. It was not just a smooth ride toward success. The hours were long, the learning curve steep, and there were times when Rachel found herself overwhelmed. She had once thought that getting her foot in the door was the hardest part, but now she realized the real challenge was proving she belonged. One afternoon, while waiting for a meeting to begin at a small, bustling cafe, Rachel sat alone, reflecting on how much she had grown. She had come a long way from the shy waitress who felt invisible in the vastness of New York's business world. She had learned new skills, honed her communication, and gained confidence. But with each new step, there was the constant nagging feeling of inadequacy. Would she ever truly belong here? Would she ever stop feeling like an outsider? Her phone buzzed, pulling her out of her thoughts. It was a text from her mom. She smiled as she read it. "Did you get the coffee you like today? And don't forget to take care of yourself. Love you." Her mother, despite the struggles of raising Rachel as a single parent, had always been Rachel's biggest supporter. Rachel thought about the many nights she had stayed up late, working in the diner or working double shifts to make ends meet, all while trying to comfort her mother and keep her spirits up. It wasn't always easy, but they had made it through together. And now it felt like she was on the cusp of a new life, a life that would allow her to give back to her mom, to finally provide the stability they both deserved. But was it worth it? Was the price of ambition too high? Rachel took a deep breath and responded to her mother's text, trying to push aside the creeping doubt. She had worked so hard to get here, and there was no turning back. The feeling of inadequacy was natural. Everyone who had ever succeeded in life had faced those moments of self-doubt. What mattered was how she handled it. Would she let fear control her, or would she continue to push forward? Her thoughts were interrupted by the arrival of Andrew. He waved as he walked over to the table, his usual calm demeanor in place, but his eyes held a glint of something more. As he sat down across from her, he gave her an encouraging smile. "Hello, Rachel. How's everything going? I trust your new projects are keeping you busy." Rachel nodded, grateful for the distraction. She took a sip of her coffee, trying to find the right words. "Busy, yes. But also overwhelming sometimes. I'm trying to keep up, but there are moments when I wonder if I'm in over my head." Andrew raised an eyebrow, clearly taking in her unease. It's normal to feel overwhelmed at times, especially when you're learning so much at once. But let me ask you this. Do you still believe in your ability to succeed? Rachel paused, the question hanging in the air. She had been so focused on keeping up, on proving her worth, that she hadn't taken a moment to check in with herself. Did she still believe in herself? Was she still as driven as she had been when she first reached out to Andrew? "Yes," she said, her voice steady now. "I believe in myself. I've come this far, and I'm not going to stop now." Andrew smiled, his gaze unwavering. "Good. Because that's what matters most. It's not about being perfect, Rachel. It's about having the persistence to keep going, even when the road gets tough. It's about learning from your mistakes, adapting, and finding the strength to move forward." Rachel nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders. The pressure she had placed on herself, this constant need to be flawless, had been a burden. Andrew was right. She didn't have to be perfect. She only needed to keep going, keep learning, and keep believing in herself. After a moment of silence, Andrew leaned forward slightly. "There's something else I want to tell you. I know you've been doubting whether this path is the right one, whether it's all worth it. But Rachel, I'm going to tell you something important. You are exactly where you need to be. Don't let fear of failure hold you back." Rachel felt a swell of gratitude, her eyes welling up unexpectedly. She hadn't realized how much she needed to hear those words until now. It was a reminder that she wasn't alone in this journey, and that there were people who believed in her, who saw her worth, even when she couldn't see it herself. "Thank you, Andrew," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. "I really needed to hear that." Andrew gave her an understanding nod. "You're welcome. Just remember, the path to success is rarely smooth, but it's yours to walk. And I have no doubt you'll get there." As Rachel left the cafe later that day, her heart felt lighter than it had in weeks. She had been carrying the weight of self-doubt for so long, but now she understood that it was okay to stumble along the way. The important thing was to keep moving forward, no matter how hard it got. Walking down the busy streets of New York, Rachel felt a renewed sense of purpose. The world around her had not changed. It still buzzed with noise, with people rushing from one place to another. But for the first time in a long while, she felt like she belonged. She had taken a risk, reached out for help, and now she was starting to see the fruits of her labor. It wasn't just about the career she was building, it was about the person she was becoming. And with each step she took, Rachel knew that her journey was far from over. She had just begun to scratch the surface of her potential. As she walked home that evening, the sky above was tinged with the soft pinks and oranges of a setting sun. For the first time in a long time, Rachel felt hopeful. The road ahead would be tough, but it was her road to walk. And she was ready to take on whatever came next. Rachel's life seemed to be on the right track. She had secured a few freelance opportunities, expanding her network, and learning the ropes of the business world. Andrew had been a constant mentor, guiding her when needed, but giving her the space to grow on her own. Every day felt like a challenge, but in a good way. She was thriving, she thought. But then came the unexpected. One chilly afternoon, as Rachel sat in her favorite corner of the cafe, reviewing some marketing strategies for a new client, her phone buzzed. The message came from her mother, and the message itself seemed simple enough. "I think we need to talk. Call me when you have a chance." Her stomach twisted. Rachel hadn't heard those words from her mother in years, not since her dad had left when she was little. Those words usually meant something bad. Her thoughts raced, and she quickly excused herself from the cafe, stepping out onto the busy sidewalk to make the call. "Hi, Mom. What's going on?" Her mother's voice came through, shaky and quiet. "Rachel, I don't know how to say this, but I lost my job. The company downsized, and they let me go. I don't know what to do, honey. I've tried looking for something else, but it's tough out here." The weight of her mother's words hit Rachel like a ton of bricks. In that moment, the busy city around her seemed to disappear, swallowed by a suffocating silence. Her mother had always been the strong one, the one who had managed to get by even when things seemed impossible. But now, the roles had shifted. Now, it was Rachel who had to be the strong one. "I'm so sorry, Mom," Rachel said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'll figure something out. We'll figure this out together." Her mind raced. How could she balance this new responsibility with everything else? She had been focused so much on her own growth, her own ambitions, that the reality of her family's situation suddenly felt like a heavy anchor pulling her back down. She hadn't anticipated this. What if she couldn't be there for her mom in the way she needed? That night, Rachel sat alone in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling, feeling both helpless and overwhelmed. She had made so much progress. She had found this path she was so excited about. But now it felt like her mother's struggles were threatening to undo all the good things in her life. Her phone buzzed again. It was a text from Andrew. "How's everything going, Rachel? I know it's been a busy week. If you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." Rachel hesitated, her fingers hovering over the screen. She wanted to talk to him, wanted to explain what was happening, but she wasn't sure how. She didn't want to sound like she was giving up or drowning. After a moment of contemplation, she typed a simple response. "Things are tough right now. I'm dealing with some family stuff. I'll be okay. Just need to figure things out." She immediately regretted it. The words felt too weak, too vague. She wanted to say more about how scared she was, how overwhelmed she felt. But it wasn't the right time. The next few days were a blur. Rachel did her best to keep up with her work, but her mind kept drifting back to her mom. They had talked several times since that first conversation, but the uncertainty of her mother's situation loomed large. Rachel had always been there for her, helping with bills, picking up extra shifts, supporting her when times were tough. But this time, the stakes felt higher. She couldn't afford to lose her focus, but she also couldn't ignore what her mom was going through. Rachel knew she had to make a decision. She couldn't keep walking this tightrope forever, trying to balance the world she was building with the world her mom had fallen into. Something had to give. Then, out of the blue, Andrew called. Rachel hadn't expected to hear from him so soon, especially after the vague text she'd sent. But there he was on the other end of the line. "Rachel," he said, his tone softer than usual, "I've been thinking about your situation. I know things have been tough, but I just wanted to remind you that I'm here to help if you need it. You don't have to carry this burden on your own." Rachel's throat tightened, and for the first time in a long while, she felt the sting of tears threatening to spill. She had been so focused on keeping her own world together, so worried about her mom that she hadn't realized how isolated she had become. Andrew's offer of help felt like a lifeline. "I don't want to burden you, Andrew," she said, her voice wavering. "I know you've done a lot for me already, but this is different. My mom needs me right now. I need to figure out a way to help her." Andrew's voice was steady, reassuring. "You're not burdening me, Rachel. You're a strong woman, and I admire your drive. But it's okay to ask for help when you need it. I've seen your potential. I believe in you. And if there's any way I can assist you, whether it's with contacts or advice, or just someone to talk to, I'm here. We can figure this out together." His words sank deep, giving her a new sense of perspective. Maybe she didn't have to do everything on her own. Maybe it was okay to lean on the people who cared about her. Andrew was right. Her journey wasn't just about climbing to the top. It was about finding balance, about having the humility to accept help when it was offered. The next day, Rachel visited her mother, determined to find a solution. It was time to face the reality of the situation head-on. They sat down together, and after a long conversation, Rachel promised to do everything she could to help her mom find a new job. And, in turn, she had to remind herself that her journey, though still in progress, would continue to move forward. Rachel left that meeting with a new resolve. She wasn't going to let the weight of the world drag her down. The road ahead might be full of obstacles, but she had proven time and again that she could overcome them. And with the support of those around her, she could find a way to succeed, not just for herself, but for her family, too. As she walked home that evening, she felt lighter. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in weeks, she felt ready to face it. Rachel sat in her apartment, staring at the blank screen in front of her. The glow of the laptop illuminated her face in the dark room. She had so many ideas for the next phase of her business career, but right now, nothing seemed to be coming together. The weight of everything that had happened over the past few weeks, the shift in her family's situation, her increasing responsibilities at work, and the pressure she had placed on herself, was starting to take a toll on her. She had been juggling it all. New opportunities, trying to help her mom, managing her relationships. At times, she had to fight the urge to collapse from exhaustion. But more than anything, she found herself questioning if this path she was on was the right one. Was it worth it? Was it worth the long nights, the constant pressure to succeed, and the strain it was putting on her personal life? Rachel had always prided herself on her ambition. It was what had driven her to take chances in the first place. It was what had pushed her to make that first phone call to Andrew, to reach for something beyond her grasp. But now, the dream of a successful career felt like a distant light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from Andrew. "Hey, Rachel, I've been thinking about our conversation the other day. I know things are tough right now, but I want to remind you that you're not alone in this. If you need anything, I'm here. Let's talk soon." She read the message again, and for a moment, she thought about reaching out to him. He had always been supportive, a constant source of encouragement. But this time, she hesitated. The pressure to succeed was coming from within herself, not just from her external circumstances. She didn't want to burden him with her doubts. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was running out of time. Time to prove herself, time to make her mark. As much as she tried to bury it, the reality was becoming clearer. She was burning out. Her ambitions were consuming her, and she didn't know how much longer she could keep up the pace. The following week, Rachel went to one of the networking events Andrew had recommended. It was a gathering of young professionals, all ambitious and eager to make connections. As soon as she walked into the sleek, modern space, she could feel the buzz of excitement in the air. Conversations swirled around her, people laughing and shaking hands, sharing ideas, building networks. She found herself standing by the drinks table, feeling suddenly small and out of place. She had spent the last few years working tirelessly for this moment, dreaming of a career that would let her live comfortably, give back to her mom, and prove to herself that she was worthy of the life she had worked so hard for. But now that she was here, surrounded by others with similar dreams, the weight of it all was suffocating. Andrew found her in the crowd, his ever-present smile reassuring. "Hey, Rachel. I'm glad you made it." He gestured toward the group of people around him. "I've been talking to a few potential collaborators. How about you?" Rachel smiled weakly. "It's great. A little overwhelming, though." Andrew looked at her with a knowing gaze, then nodded. "It's a lot to take in. But remember, it's about finding your pace. You don't have to have it all figured out right now." She sighed. "I feel like I'm running out of time. Everyone here is so ahead of me. I've been working so hard, but sometimes it feels like I'm not moving fast enough." Andrew raised an eyebrow. "Is that how you really feel? Or is that the pressure you've been putting on yourself?" Rachel paused, taken aback by the question. She hadn't really thought about it that way. For so long, she had measured her success based on how quickly she could climb the ladder, how many connections she could make, how much progress she could show in a short amount of time. It had always been about moving forward, achieving something tangible, and proving herself. But now that she was here, in this moment, it felt like she was missing something important, like she had neglected to ask herself why she was in such a rush. I think it's the pressure I've been putting on myself," she admitted quietly. "I've been so focused on succeeding that I've lost sight of why I'm doing this in the first place." Andrew smiled, his expression softening. "Rachel, success is important, but so is balance. You're not running a race. You're building something sustainable. The people around you are just as human as you are. They have their own struggles, their own doubts. Don't compare yourself to them. Everyone's journey is different." Rachel nodded slowly, processing his words. It was true. She had been so consumed by the idea of success that she had forgotten the importance of enjoying the journey. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't about racing ahead of everyone else. It was about finding her own path at her own pace. The next few days were a turning point for Rachel. She took a step back from her usual hustle, giving herself the permission to slow down and reflect. She revisited her motivations, why she had started this journey in the first place, what she wanted her future to look like, and how she could find fulfillment without burning herself out. Rachel realized she had been putting so much pressure on herself to succeed quickly that she hadn't taken the time to truly appreciate the progress she had already made. She had already come so far. She had built relationships, secured opportunities, and discovered strengths within herself she hadn't known existed. The path was never going to be perfect, but she was moving in the right direction. Rachel knew she still had work to do. There were still challenges ahead, both personally and professionally. But for the first time in a long while, she felt like she could breathe. The weight of her ambition had lifted, replaced by a new understanding. Success wasn't about how fast she got there. It was about making the journey meaningful. As Rachel walked home that night, her thoughts felt clearer. She didn't have to be everything all at once. She could take her time, enjoy the process, and build something that was worth more than just accolades. It would be a life she could be proud of, not because of how quickly she reached her goals, but because of how she got there. A few weeks had passed since Rachel had her conversation with Andrew, and though her perspective had shifted, she still felt the weight of her responsibilities. She was no longer rushing, but that didn't mean the road ahead was easy. With her mother still struggling to find work and Rachel's own growing workload, there was a constant sense of pressure that she couldn't shake. But something else had started to weigh on her heart, the relationships in her life, particularly the one with Andrew. As Rachel's business began to grow, so did her interactions with him. Andrew was more than just a mentor now. He was someone she turned to for advice and often for support. He had become a constant in her life, offering encouragement when she doubted herself and pushing her when she needed to be reminded of her potential. But lately, she had been feeling something more. Something she wasn't entirely ready to acknowledge. One rainy evening, Rachel found herself sitting in her favorite cafe, deep in thought. The cafe was quieter than usual, the sounds of coffee cups clinking and quiet chatter filling the space. She had just finished a meeting with a client and had a few hours before her next engagement. As she sipped on her coffee, she noticed that her phone had a new message from Andrew. "Rachel, I've been thinking about you a lot lately. I know things have been busy for both of us, but I wanted to see if you'd be free this weekend. Maybe we could grab dinner? Just the two of us." Her heart skipped a beat. For a moment, she stared at the message, her mind racing. Dinner? Just the two of them? She had always viewed Andrew as a mentor, but as their relationship deepened, those boundaries began to blur. She had caught herself wondering, what if it was more than just professional? Was there a chance that Andrew saw her in the same way she was beginning to see him? Or was she reading into things, letting her emotions get the best of her? She quickly typed out a response, trying to keep her tone casual. "Dinner sounds great. I'm free on Saturday evening. Let's meet at 7. Almost immediately, a reply popped up. "It's a date. Looking forward to it." The words sent a thrill through her. But alongside the excitement came a sense of unease. Was she ready for this? Was she ready to open herself up to something that could change their dynamic, something that could alter the course of both their professional and personal lives? The rest of the week passed in a blur. Rachel couldn't stop thinking about her upcoming dinner with Andrew, but she tried her best to keep focused on work. She finalized several new projects, attended a networking event, and continued to help her mom with her job search. But every time her phone buzzed, her stomach twisted in anticipation. It was always Andrew, checking in, sending little messages of encouragement. Each time, the connection between them deepened, and each time, Rachel felt more and more uncertain about what that meant. Saturday evening arrived, and Rachel stood in front of her mirror, adjusting her dress. She had opted for something casual but stylish, a simple navy blue dress, with a flattering cut that made her feel confident, but not overdone. She glanced at the clock. It was almost time. Arriving at the restaurant, Rachel took a deep breath as she stepped out of her car. The warm light from inside spilled onto the street, and the chatter of patrons inside mixed with the gentle hum of the city. She walked inside, her eyes scanning the room for Andrew. It didn't take long to spot him. He was sitting at a table near the back, his posture relaxed, and a smile on his face when he saw her. "Hey, Rachel," he said warmly as she approached. "You look amazing." "Thanks," she replied, trying to mask the flutter of nerves in her stomach. "I'm excited for tonight." Andrew stood as she sat down across from him, and they quickly fell into a comfortable rhythm of conversation. The evening started just as it always had, discussing work, exchanging stories, and laughing at inside jokes. But this time, something felt different. There was an unspoken tension, a shift in the air, and Rachel couldn't ignore it. She was acutely aware of the way Andrew looked at her, the way his eyes lingered on her, the way his voice softened when he spoke. At one point during the meal, Andrew looked directly at her, his expression serious. "Rachel, I need to ask you something. I've been thinking about it for a while, and I don't want to leave things unsaid." Rachel's heart raced. Was this it? Was he about to say what she thought he might? "Go ahead," she said, her voice steady even though her mind was swirling with thoughts of what this could mean. Andrew hesitated for a moment, his gaze fixed on hers. "I care about you. I've admired your strength, your drive, and your determination since the day we met. But recently, I've realized that it's not just admiration. I've developed feelings for you, Rachel. I've been trying to ignore it, but I can't anymore." Rachel's breath caught in her throat. It was like the world had stopped. The words hung in the air, heavier than she could have imagined. She felt a mix of emotions flood through her, excitement, fear, confusion. She hadn't expected this, not so soon, and certainly not in this way. Andrew continued, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. I know we've built something really good together, and I don't want to risk it by bringing this up. But I also don't want to keep pretending like it's not there. Rachel sat frozen for a moment, her mind racing. What did this mean for her? What did it mean for them, for their professional relationship? She had always trusted Andrew, but now it felt like the foundation they had built together was suddenly shifting beneath her feet. Finally, she spoke, her voice a mix of honesty and hesitation. Andrew, I don't know what to say. I value our relationship so much, everything we've built, both personally and professionally. But I don't know if I'm ready for this. Andrew nodded, his expression a mix of understanding and regret. I get it. I don't want to pressure you, Rachel. I just needed to be honest with you. No matter what, I want us to stay friends, to keep supporting each other. But I needed you to know. Rachel's heart softened. She didn't want to lose this connection. She didn't want to let fear ruin what they had. But she also knew that this was a crossroads. Whatever happened next, it would change things. And she wasn't sure if she was ready to take that step yet. They finished dinner in a quiet, contemplative silence. The night didn't end with the rush of excitement Rachel had imagined, but rather with a quiet understanding between the two of them. They had both laid their cards on the table, and now they would have to figure out what to do next. Rachel knew one thing for certain. This was the test of their loyalty, not just to each other, but to the future they were both working so hard to create. How they navigated this would shape the path ahead. The next few days after that dinner felt like a blur for Rachel. She couldn't stop thinking about Andrew's confession. It was on her mind every waking moment, and she found it hard to focus on anything else. Her phone sat by her side, always buzzing with messages, emails, and notifications. But all she could think about was Andrew. He had been more than a mentor to her. He had been a steady presence in her life when things seemed to be falling apart. He had become someone she trusted, someone who had seen her at her best and her worst. And now he had laid his feelings on the table, leaving her in a position where she had to make a choice, one that would affect not just her personal life, but her career as well. Rachel sat at her desk late one evening, papers scattered around her, her laptop open to the latest proposal she was working on. But she couldn't concentrate. The words on the screen blurred together. She had promised herself that she would focus on her business, that she would stay true to her goals, but the conflict inside her was too much to ignore. She kept thinking about Andrew's words, his eyes when he told her he cared for her. It felt so real, so genuine, but was she ready for that kind of relationship? Could she afford to let something like that interfere with her professional ambitions? She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes, letting out a deep breath. It had been a long week, and she could feel the weight of it all pressing down on her shoulders. The demands from her business were growing, and her mom still hadn't found steady work. Rachel was her family's lifeline, and there was a part of her that couldn't risk anything that might take her focus away from that responsibility. She needed to be strong. She needed to keep moving forward. But there was another part of her. The part that was drawn to Andrew, that appreciated his support and understood what he had been through. She realized she hadn't felt this way about anyone in a long time. For the first time, the idea of opening up to someone felt like a possibility, not a threat. Her phone buzzed again. It was another message from Andrew. Rachel, I've been thinking a lot about our conversation. I know I may have caught you off guard, and I don't want you to feel any pressure. I just want to be honest with you. If you're not ready for anything more than what we have, I respect that. But I want you to know I'm here. Always. Rachel's chest tightened as she read the message. Andrew's words were kind, patient, but she could feel the underlying vulnerability there. He wasn't pushing her, but he was laying it all out, offering her the space to decide. I know, she replied after a long pause, her fingers trembling as she typed. I just need some time to think about it. I don't want to rush anything, and I don't want to make a decision that could mess things up between us. I care about you too, Andrew. I just don't know where this could go." Her heart raced as she sent the message, and for a moment, she regretted opening herself up to the conversation. But then, almost immediately, Andrew's reply came through. "Take all the time you need, Rachel. I'll be here when you're ready, no rush." Rachel read those words over and over. She had always admired Andrew for his patience, his wisdom. He had never pressured her into anything, and even now, when his feelings were clear, he still respected her boundaries. That evening, Rachel decided to take a walk to clear her mind. She needed some space to think about her next steps. The evening air was cool, and the quiet streets offered a sense of peace she hadn't felt in days. She walked for nearly an hour, letting her thoughts flow freely. There were so many things pulling at her: her business, her mom, the pressure of her family's expectations, and now this unexpected emotional connection with Andrew. But in the silence of the night, something clicked. Rachel realized that she had been so focused on the future, on the big picture, that she had neglected to live in the moment. She had been so worried about everything falling apart that she hadn't allowed herself to experience the good things that were happening right now. Her business was thriving, and she had built it from the ground up. Her mom was starting to get back on her feet, and their relationship was stronger than ever. And then there was Andrew, someone who had been there for her, who believed in her, and who wanted to be more than just a friend. She didn't have all the answers. She didn't know where this relationship with Andrew would lead, but one thing was clear: she didn't want to lose him. She wasn't ready to shut the door on the possibility of something more. The next morning, Rachel called her mom. "Hey, Mom, how's everything going?" she asked, trying to keep her voice light. "Good, good. I've been looking at some job postings. I feel like something will come through soon. How are you?" Her mom replied, her voice warm but tired. "I'm okay. Just busy," Rachel said, hesitating for a moment before continuing. "I've been thinking a lot about my future lately, and about what really matters. And I think I need to take a little more time for myself, to figure out where I want to go from here, both personally and professionally." Her mom was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "Rachel, you're always so focused on taking care of everyone else. Don't forget to take care of yourself too, sweetheart." "I know, Mom," Rachel said softly, a lump forming in her throat. "I just don't want to let anyone down." "You'll never let us down, Rachel. You're doing the best you can, and that's all anyone can ask for. Take your time. Figure things out. I'll be okay." As Rachel hung up the phone, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She had always carried the burden of her family's well-being on her back, but her mom's words were a reminder that she didn't have to carry it alone. And in that moment, she realized that it wasn't just about balancing work and family. It was about balancing her own heart, learning to open herself up, take risks, and trust that she was worthy of love, of success, of happiness. The next day, she texted Andrew. "I've been thinking. I'm ready to take that step. Let's see where this goes together." The reply came quickly. "I'm glad to hear that, Rachel. Let's take it slow, okay? No expectations, just us, figuring it out." Rachel smiled to herself. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she was exactly where she needed to be. The days following Rachel's decision were filled with a blend of excitement and nervous anticipation. As she and Andrew slowly explored this new dynamic between them, things shifted in ways that Rachel hadn't expected. They agreed to take it slow, as they both knew the gravity of their situation. Not only were they navigating the possibility of a romantic relationship, but they also shared a deep professional connection. It was uncharted territory, but for the first time in a long while, Rachel felt like she was truly living in the moment. She woke up early on Monday morning, the soft rays of the sun pouring through the window of her apartment. The scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and Rachel allowed herself a moment of peace before diving into the hustle and bustle of her day. There was a new sense of clarity in her mind. She had made the decision to embrace the unknown, to trust herself, and to trust Andrew. She knew there would be challenges ahead, but she also understood that sometimes growth came from stepping outside of one's comfort zone. She glanced at her phone, which buzzed with a new message. It was from Andrew. "Hey, Rachel. I've been thinking about our conversation. I'm glad we're on the same page. Just wanted to remind you that no matter what happens, I'm here for you. Always." Her heart warmed as she read his words. Andrew had never been anything but supportive, and this message was just another reminder of how lucky she was to have him in her life. But still, a small part of her hesitated. Was she truly ready to let go of her fears and insecurities? To let herself be vulnerable? Rachel spent the morning meeting with clients and working on a new project proposal. She had been so focused on her work, on her dreams of growing her business, that the thought of a personal life had seemed distant, almost irrelevant. But now it felt different. She realized that success didn't just come from work, it came from the people you surrounded yourself with, from the relationships you nurtured. By late afternoon, her mind started to drift back to Andrew. He had texted her earlier, suggesting they grab dinner together that evening. Rachel agreed without hesitation, excited to see where the evening would lead. As the sun set and the city's lights began to twinkle, she found herself at their favorite restaurant, waiting for Andrew to arrive. When he walked in, his familiar, easy smile made her heart flutter. There was something undeniably comforting about him. They shared a quiet moment of warmth as he sat down across from her, and Rachel realized that, in spite of everything, the unknowns, the challenges, the risks, they were exactly where they needed to be. Together. "Hey," Andrew said softly, his eyes twinkling. "How's your day been?" "It's been busy," Rachel replied, taking a sip of her drink. "But I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us." Andrew raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Everything?" She nodded, her gaze meeting his. "Yeah, about where this could go. About whether I'm ready for all the changes that might come with it." Andrew smiled, his voice calm and steady. "Rachel, I don't want you to feel like you have to rush into anything. I'm not asking you to change who you are or what you're doing. I just want to be a part of your journey, whatever that looks like." Rachel's heart melted a little at his words. He wasn't asking for perfection or for her to abandon her dreams. He was asking for honesty and connection. And in that moment, she realized that wasn't something she could let slip away. They spent the evening talking, sharing stories of their pasts, laughing at each other's quirks, and dreaming about the future. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and Rachel found herself letting go of her doubts. The fears that had once held her back seemed smaller now. She realized that her life, in all its chaos and beauty, wasn't defined solely by her business or by her responsibilities. It was also shaped by the people she loved, the relationships she built, and the moments she allowed herself to experience. As the evening wore on, Andrew reached across the table and gently took her hand in his. Rachel looked up at him, her breath catching in her throat. "I want you to know that no matter what, I'm here." "I'm not going anywhere," Andrew said, his voice low but sincere. "And I want to see where this goes together." Rachel smiled, her eyes shining with a mix of emotions. She squeezed his hand in return, knowing in that moment that the future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid of it. She was ready to take that step. "I'm ready, Andrew," she said, her voice soft but firm. "Let's see where this goes." They spent the rest of the evening enjoying each other's company, but as Rachel drove home later that night, her mind raced. She had made the choice to step forward into the unknown, to trust herself and the people who mattered most. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt confident that whatever happened, she was ready for it. In the weeks that followed, Rachel and Andrew navigated their new relationship with care and consideration. They continued to support each other in their respective careers, but they also made time for each other, whether it was quiet nights at home or spontaneous weekend getaways. Rachel knew that there would still be challenges ahead, but she also understood that with Andrew by her side, she could face anything. Her business continued to thrive, and as she balanced her career with her personal life, she began to find a new sense of peace. The burden of feeling like she had to do everything on her own began to lift, and she realized that the most important thing in life wasn't always about achieving success. Sometimes, it was about the people you loved and the relationships you nurtured along the way. Andrew became a constant presence in her life, not just as a mentor, but as a partner. He was there for her during the highs and the lows, offering support, love, and understanding. And in return, Rachel gave him her heart, knowing that, together, they could take on whatever the future had in store. As the months passed, Rachel's life became more balanced. She had built something strong for herself, a thriving business, a supportive relationship with her mother, and the love of someone who truly cared for her. And she realized that while life would always be full of challenges, it was the people you chose to share it with that made it all worth it. The journey was just beginning, and Rachel was ready for whatever came next. Because, for the first time in her life, she wasn't walking alone. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?